Radio programmers in the mid-1970s let plenty of things slide past them that a modern audience would catch in an instant. A great beat, a smooth vocal, and a catchy chorus could disguise almost anything, as long as nobody stopped to actually listen closely to the words. So today, we're counting down 12 famous songs from 1975 people didn't realize were filthy. Number 12, Fire by the Ohio Players. This Dayton, Ohio funk band had already built a strong regional reputation for provocative album covers, often featuring nearly nude Playboy models draped in various props and elaborate studio settings. By the time this particular track became their first true nationwide #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1975, cementing their crossover from a regional funk act into a genuine national headliner. Written mainly by guitarist Leroy Sugarfoot Bonner, the song used the image of a burning, uncontrollable flame as a stand-in for overwhelming physical attraction between two people, opening dramatically with the wail of an actual fire truck siren that the band went out of their way to have recorded specifically for use on the finished track. Stevie Wonder happened to hear an early rough mix of the song while the Ohio Players were touring through California that year, and he reportedly told the band right there on the spot that they had a genuine massive hit sitting on their hands. The song topped both the pop and R&B charts simultaneously and eventually sold well over 1 million copies, becoming one of the single most played party songs of the entire year across radio formats. The song's success also came during a period of genuinely intense competition on the charts that particular winter, as it beat out several other rising funk and soul singles to give the Ohio Players their first true nationwide crossover pop hit after years spent building regional success on smaller independent record labels. Rob Parisi, who later went on to write Wild Cherry's own massive hit, Play That Funky Music, just a year afterward, has specifically cited this very Ohio Players track as one of his own direct musical inspirations at the time. Because the metaphor stayed just vague enough, and because the horn-driven arrangement made it impossible not to dance to, most casual listeners at the time simply heard an upbeat funk anthem rather than a fairly direct song about desire. Number 11, Boogie on Reggae Woman by Stevie Wonder. Released as a single at the very end of 1974 and climbing steadily to number 1 on the R&B chart by January 1975, before eventually peaking at number 3 on the overall Billboard Hot 100, this track came from Wonder's widely acclaimed and commercially dominant album Fulfillingness' first finale. Despite exactly what its title might suggest to a first-time listener expecting island rhythms, the song has almost nothing whatsoever to do with actual reggae music, leaning instead on a heavy rolling funk groove built around a distinctive Moog bass synthesizer line that Wonder, ever the restless multi-instrumentalist, played entirely by himself during the studio sessions. The lyrics describe a man's frank, unmistakable physical desire for a woman he's watching move across a crowded room, delivered with a playful, almost conversational looseness that made the whole song feel more like an easygoing party record than anything overtly explicit. I like to reggae, but you dance too fast. Wonder's soaring falsetto vocal runs and the song's loose, largely improvisational feel helped it become a genuine favorite on both pop and R&B radio simultaneously, eventually earning it a spot among the most frequently sampled Stevie Wonder tracks in later hip-hop production, its bass line turning up on records released decades after the original session. The parent album, Fulfillingness' first finale, went on to win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year at the 1975 ceremony, cementing Wonder's remarkably dominant run through that particular era of his career, a run that also included the acclaimed Innervisions before it, and would soon include the massive double album Songs in the Key of Life not long after it. Because the song leaned so heavily on rhythm and feel rather than blunt language, many listeners simply absorbed it as one more great dance groove from one of the era's most respected songwriters. Number 10, Lady Marmalade by LaBelle. Written by veteran songwriters Bob Crewe and Kenny Nolan, a duo already responsible for hits by other artists throughout the previous decade, this song was inspired by the two men's fascination with the so-called ladies of the evening working New Orleans' famous French Quarter, and it became a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in March 1975, spending 5 full weeks parked at the very top of the chart. The song's most memorable line, delivered entirely in French as part of the chorus, translates directly to a fairly direct invitation to spend the night together, a fact that Patti LaBelle herself has said the group genuinely did not understand or even think to question when they first went into the studio to record it. LaBelle has explained in later interviews that she only actually learned what the phrase meant after directly asking producer Alan Toussaint once the song was already climbing steadily up the charts, and she has since described feeling both genuinely amused and more than a little mortified once she finally found out. Because American television broadcast standards of that particular era strictly prohibited overtly sexual content from airing during primetime, LaBelle sometimes had to quietly alter or soften portions of the chorus whenever the group performed the song live in front of network television cameras. Before LaBelle ever recorded it, the song had actually been demoed first by a studio group called The 11th Hour, and it only eventually reached LaBelle after producer Alan Toussaint suggested the trio, who had already spent years performing together, going all the way back to the 1960s under the name Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, take a shot at the material themselves in his New Orleans studio. Decades later, the song remains one of the most widely recognized disco-era hits of all time, and countless fans singing along over the years at weddings, parties, and karaoke nights have had no more idea what the French lyrics actually meant than Patti LaBelle herself did on the very day she first recorded them. Number 9, Get Down Tonight by KC and the Sunshine Band. Released in February 1975 as the very first single from the band's self-titled second album, this Miami-based disco and funk track became KC and the Sunshine Band's first ever #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. The lyrics, built around a casual invitation to dance and, more explicitly still, to make love before the night is through, were delivered with such an upbeat, carefree, almost giddy groove that the underlying sexual content largely just blended into the general party atmosphere surrounding the entire record. Built around a distinctive guitar riff that reportedly had to be sped up during production just to properly fit the song's tempo, the track became a defining sound of the early disco era and helped establish the exact template the band would go on to reuse for several more #1 hits over that same remarkable year. Casey and Finch had already written and produced another act's massive hit the year before, George McRae's chart-topping Rock Your Baby, before eventually deciding to step out from behind the scenes themselves and start recording their own material under the name KC and the Sunshine Band. Because the song's energy read as pure celebration rather than seduction, it became a staple at everything from nightclubs to family gatherings and roller rinks. played constantly by listeners who rarely stopped to parse exactly what getting down was supposed to mean. Number 8, Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Featured on the band's third studio album, Toys in the Attic, released in April 1975, this song didn't actually become a genuine commercial hit until Columbia Records reissued the single a full year later, once the band's rapidly growing live popularity on the concert circuit had finally caught up with the strength of the material itself. Frontman Steven Tyler wrote the lyrics about a young man's first sexual experience with an older, far more confident and worldly partner, drawing loosely on stories and half-remembered scenes from make-out parties he recalled from his own teenage years, growing up between New Hampshire and New York State. Tyler has openly admitted in interviews across the years that the words are, in his own words, filthy, and that he deliberately disguised the meaning cleverly enough to let the song slide comfortably past casual listeners and radio programmers alike, without ever drawing much serious scrutiny at all. The now famous title itself actually came from a completely unrelated source entirely, a single line of dialogue the band overheard while watching Mel Brooks's comedy Young Frankenstein together during a much-needed break from an otherwise frustrating and slow-moving recording session that week. The track is also notable historically as one of the earliest hit songs to feature a talkbox effect, an unusual device that lets a guitarist physically shape individual notes using their own mouth, a technique later popularized even further by artists like Peter Frampton just a couple of years afterward. Because the song's funky groove and Joe Perry's memorable guitar riff dominated most listeners' attention for years, the lyrics' actual explicit content largely went unnoticed until Run DMC's landmark 1986 collaboration with the band, which introduced an entire new generation of listeners to both the music itself and, for many of them for the very first time, the actual words being sung. Number 7, Feel Like Making Love by Bad Company.
Darling, I don't live without you.
Released in the summer of 1975 from the album Straight Shooter, this song gave the British rock supergroup, featuring former Free vocalist Paul Rodgers on lead, its only number 1 hit on the entire Billboard Hot 100 chart. Despite carrying a title that states its intentions about as plainly as any song possibly could, the track's slow, atmospheric build and Rodgers' smooth, understated vocal delivery gave it an almost gentle, romantic quality rather than anything that read as explicit to most casual radio listeners at the time. The song became a staple of classic rock radio for decades afterward. Frequently played at weddings, proms, and slow dances by people who seemingly never once registered just how directly the title itself described exactly what was happening throughout the rest of the lyrics. The song itself was co-written by Rodgers and guitarist Mick Ralphs, both of whom had come from other well-regarded British bands, Free and Mott the Hoople respectively, before the two of them joined forces along with other veteran musicians to form Bad Company as one of that era's earliest true rock supergroups. Because the arrangement leaned into mood and atmosphere rather than any of the more overt language used by some of Bad Company's disco-era peers, the song managed to sound almost tasteful despite being, in plain terms, a song entirely about wanting to have sex.
Think about love.
Number 6, That's the Way I Like It by KC and the Sunshine Band. Released in June 1975, this became KC and the Sunshine Band's second number 1 hit of that remarkable year, spending time at the very top of the Billboard Hot 100 on 2 separate occasions within the same 1-month stretch. a feat only a small handful of songs in chart history have ever managed to pull off. A widely discussed 1975 Time magazine article specifically singled this song out as an example of what the publication dubbed sex rock, alongside Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby, citing both the suggestive lyrics and the song's repeated moaning-style vocal ad-libs as evidence. Ironically, bandleader Harry Wayne Casey has said the group actually tried hard to tone the song down during the recording process itself. Worried at the time that the constant repetition of certain background vocal sounds came across just a little too much like actual groaning for comfort on daytime radio. Casey has explained in later interviews that he deliberately kept the lyrics suggestive rather than fully explicit so that listeners could interpret the meaning however they personally wanted to, a deliberate choice that let the song slip comfortably past radio censors while still carrying an unmistakable undertone for anyone bothering to pay close attention to the words themselves. The song has since been covered and sampled by a genuinely wide range of later artists across different genres entirely, including soul singer Madeline Bell, the new wave act Dead or Alive, and multiple hip-hop artists over the decades who borrowed its instantly recognizable chorus for their own very different tracks. Number 5. Third-Rate Romance by the amazing Rhythm Aces.
Third-rate romance, low-rent romping.
Written by the band's own singer and guitarist Russell Smith, and reportedly composed years earlier at a Knoxville, Tennessee restaurant called Ruby Tuesday, this song became the debut single for the newly formed group in the summer of 1975, eventually climbing into the top 20 on both the pop and country charts simultaneously, a genuine crossover rarity that most Nashville acts of the era rarely managed to pull off. The lyrics follow two strangers meeting at a bar, drinking away their nerves over small talk and forced conversation, and eventually leaving together for a cheap roadside motel just outside of town, all narrated with a wry, almost comedic sense of detachment that softened just how blunt the actual subject matter really was underneath all the clever storytelling, because the song was broadly categorized as country rock and delivered with a folksy, easygoing storytelling charm rather than any overtly explicit sexual language.
And they left the bar, they got in his car and
It slipped comfortably onto both pop and country radio formats without drawing much genuine controversy at the time of its original release. The song had actually first been recorded a full year earlier, back in 1974, up in Montreal by singer-songwriter Jesse Winchester and his own backing group, which happened to also be called the Rhythm Aces at the time, before Smith's newly formed band took the same tune south of the border, reworked its arrangement slightly, and turned it into a genuine national hit of their own the following summer. The song became the band's signature hit and has been covered by numerous other artists over the decades since, including a successful country chart return by Sammy Kershaw in 1994, introducing an entirely new generation to the same tale of a low-rent one-night stand.
romance, low-rent rendezvous.
Number 4. One of These Nights by the Eagles. Released as the title track from the band's 1975 album, this song became the Eagles' very first #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 that August. Driven largely by Don Henley's smooth falsetto lead vocal performance and one of guitarist Don Felder's most memorable extended guitar solos of the entire decade. The lyrics describe a narrator chasing after what he calls a dark desire on one of these nights, using deliberately vague, almost dreamlike language throughout the verses to describe wanting someone he simply can't quite have or hold on to. because the song's Southern California soft rock sound leans so heavily into atmosphere and mood rather than direct language. Most listeners absorbed it simply as a moody, romantic classic, rather than a song built around raw physical longing.
I've been searching for the daughter of the devil.
The track helped push the accompanying album all the way to the top of the Billboard 200 as well, becoming the Eagles' very first #1 album in the band's young career, and the record went on to earn them their first ever Grammy nomination for Record of the Year at the following year's ceremony, cementing the group's transition from a solid country rock act into full-blown rock stardom. It remains, to this day, one of the band's most enduring and frequently played hits on classic rock radio, despite lyrics that, read closely and carefully, describe wanting someone in far more direct physical terms than the song's smooth, harmony-laden delivery and gentle Southern California sound ever really let on to casual listeners tuning in from their car radios. Number 3, Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summer. Recorded in Munich, Germany with producer Giorgio Moroder and his longtime songwriting partner Pete Bellotte, this song became Donna Summer's true American breakthrough hit after Casablanca Records released it stateside in late 1975, eventually climbing all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and establishing Summer as the defining voice of the emerging disco movement. The track famously stretched to nearly 17 minutes on its full album version, built almost entirely around Summer's breathy, moaning vocal performance layered again and again over a steady, hypnotic, repetitive disco beat that seemed to build tension without ever fully releasing it. Time magazine's widely read coverage of the era's so-called sex rock trend claimed the recording contained a striking, specific number of what the article described as simulated moments of physical pleasure, and several American radio stations reportedly refused to play the song at all initially, simply because of how explicit and unmistakable the vocal performance sounded on first listen. Casablanca Records founder Neil Bogart reportedly asked Moroder and Summer to extend the original, much shorter 3-minute demo into a far longer version after hearing it played at a private party in Los Angeles, correctly guessing on the spot that the hypnotic, repetitive groove would work perfectly for the extended dance floor format that nightclub DJs across the country were just beginning to favor by the mid-1970s, well ahead of most of the rest of the industry. Despite, or perhaps because of, that controversy, the song became one of the defining singles of the early disco era and helped establish the extended dance mix as a format that would come to define club music for years afterward, all built on a vocal performance whose meaning left very little to the imagination once anyone actually stopped to listen. Number 2, Magic Man by Heart. Written by lead singer Ann Wilson, together with her younger sister Nancy, this song appeared on Heart's debut album, Dreamboat Annie, first released in Canada in August 1975, before eventually becoming a genuine hit south of the border in the United States the following year, giving the Seattle-based band its first real national breakthrough after years of paying dues on the Pacific Northwest club circuit. The lyrics were inspired directly by Ann Wilson's own real-life relationship with Michael Fisher, the band's manager at the time, describing a magnetic, almost otherworldly pull toward a man her family reportedly didn't fully approve of at first, complete with a spoken interlude in the song where a mother's voice pleads with her daughter to simply come home before it's too late. Beneath the song's mystical, almost supernatural imagery about a man seemingly casting a spell over the narrator.
You don't have to love me, and let's get high.
the lyrics quietly describe a deeply physical infatuation, with specific lines about staying through the night and feelings that keep pulling the narrator back again and again, despite her own better judgment telling her otherwise. Nancy Wilson co-wrote much of the music alongside her older sister, and Dreamboat Annie eventually became a genuinely massive commercial success for the young band, going on to sell more than 1 million copies once American audiences fully caught up with the record in early 1976, well after its original, more modest Canadian release. The previous summer had already introduced the song to a smaller audience. Because the song leaned so heavily into dreamy atmospheric guitar textures and Ann Wilson's soaring, powerful vocal performance, most listeners simply absorbed it as a swooning, mysterious love song, rather than stopping to parse just how much of the actual lyric content was really about physical attraction, quietly overriding better judgment. Number 1. Love Roller Coaster by the Ohio Players. Released in November 1975 from the album Honey, this became the Ohio Players' second #1 hit overall, though it didn't actually reach the very top of the Billboard Hot 100 until January 1976, a full 2 months after its initial release that fall. The lyrics compare a passionate, wildly unpredictable relationship to the physical sensations of riding an actual amusement park roller coaster from start to finish, using the ride's steep dips, sudden turns, and stomach-dropping moments as a fairly direct physical stand-in for the highs and lows of genuine intimacy shared between two people caught up in each other. The song became the subject of a persistent, widely circulated urban legend, claiming that a scream heard partway through the track was actually a real recording of a model who was injured during the making of the band's provocative cover. Some story that has since been thoroughly debunked by the band members themselves, who eventually identified the sound as simply a joyful, spontaneous vocal ad-lib from keyboardist Billy Beck, caught live and unplanned during the studio session. The Ohio Players had already built a well-established reputation for provocative Playboy model featuring album covers by this particular point in their career, which only fueled the plausibility of the scream rumor among fans who simply assumed the band's provocative public imagery and behind-the-scenes reputation matched up with the far darker story being circulated about the recording. Because the song's playful, danceable energy and the ongoing urban legend controversy dominated so much of the public conversation about the track for years afterward, the actual suggestive meaning behind its central roller coaster metaphor often got lost entirely behind the far more sensational story that kept circulating around it at parties and radio call-in shows alike. 12 songs that absolutely dominated the radio throughout 1975, and 12 songs that most people danced to, sang along with at parties, or played at family gatherings without ever fully registering just how direct some of that language and imagery actually was underneath the catchy, danceable surface everyone remembers. It's a reminder that a genuinely great beat, a smooth vocal delivery, and a catchy enough chorus can carry almost anything past a casual listener without them ever stopping to notice what they were actually singing along to. If any of these songs caught you off guard, let us know down in the comments which one surprised you the most. And if you enjoyed this look back at the sneakier side of 1970s radio, give this video a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the music you grew up with and thought you already knew inside and out.